Hello, everybody, and welcome to Season 2 of the Blockchain Expert Insights podcast. This season, we'll be looking at all the emerging trends in the blockchain world. Today, I'm delighted to welcome back Reuben Godfrey, who I first had on my podcast all the way back in 2016. Good morning, Reuben.
Morning. How are you doing?
Not too bad. No, it's great. That's been a whistle stop 6 years.
Yeah.
It's have you back on this new podcast that I'm currently running.
Happy to be here, Trevor. Yeah, but it is interesting when we realized that it was 6 years ago. I think it was kind of before even a lot of the boom stuff, the ICO stuff had even happened when we spoke before, and we were kind of talking about what potentially could happen. And now we're 6 years later, and a lot of that stuff has come mainstream. So it's a very different environment these days. But still, obviously, I still think we're still at the beginning of all this, so to say.
No, 100%. And it's funny, back then, even words like blockchain and decentralized were very, very new. Whereas, we've reached, a global consensus. I won't say a level of popularity or global recognition. We're at the very early trajectory. So it's great to have yourself on board today to discuss one topic that I'm really fascinated with this topic of NFTs. So could you just give a bit of background of what your opinion are of NFTs, Reuben?
Yeah. I mean, well, like NFTs have kind of come to the sort of collective consciousness, or come to the mainstream quite recently, I guess, through a lot of these PFPs or profile pictures that are going for multi-million dollars, and pictures of monkeys and pixelated images of the crypto punks and all this sort of stuff. But they've been around. I mean, the concept has been around for a while. I mean, the idea is that it's a non-fungible token, so it's not something that can't be exchanged for something similar. It's a unique, it's got a unique digital footprint, and it should represent something, whether it's in the real world or a digital asset. So I mean, this is kind of something that came up quite early in the sort of, I'd say, like, Bitcoin obviously led the way in terms of cryptocurrency, and then sort of looking at other applications of blockchain technology. This concept of colored coins is what they were called, or that's the sort of area of interest and research. And then you had the likes of CryptoKitties and stuff like that came up a few years ago, and it's only really mushroomed or blown up in the last year, 18 months, I suppose, since like I say, these the Bored Ape Yacht Club and the crypto punks and all these sorts of things. So there's a million different ways. I think there's a lot of, I mean, for me personally, I think it's the only way I can speak is from my own opinion. But like, I grew up around a lot of my friends and people around me were artists, traditional painters and sort of did fine art, and I kind of grew up understanding that sort of stuff, and had a bit of a passion for art, and I think when traditional artists see what looks like sort of generic or meritless artwork, digital artwork being produced and being sold for multi-million dollars, multi-million pounds, it kind of ruffled some feathers. And for me as well, I was kind of, at the beginning, I was unsure if it's as an art form, is it actually something that's progressing art? Is it just a cynical sort of cash in? Is it just something that's kind of spawned from the meme coins that have kind of come up in the last, again, 2 years post ICO boom? The likes of, let me start again. So the likes of Dogecoin, I suppose, that was again hyped up by Elon Musk. For anyone in the cryptocurrency community, it was a joke. Dogecoin is literally just a clone of Bitcoin, or a fork of Bitcoin blockchain. Again, if I'm wrong on this, please tell me. If anyone, please point it out. But to the best of my understanding, Dogecoin started out like that, and it was literally started on Reddit, I believe, as a joke, and so it kind of spawned this whole sort of meme coin subculture, where people were coordinating on Telegram. You have these sort of pump and dumps or rug pulls, all this sort of stuff, where these absolutely worthless coins were just being hyped up, and people on the inside track were kind of running at the top of the market and crashing the value of the coin. So to me, that's what I felt at first. I just saw, why on earth are these just iterative, pretty bland and not very interesting pictures of monkeys, etc., being so highly valued, you know. And so I had the question: is this legitimate art? I suppose it kind of, when I took a step back and you know, you got this whole sort of the argument about NFTs, are they worth anything? You know, the right click, copy paste, you know, now I own the NFT. And it's not so simple as that. And I think a good analogy or a good way I position them for me when it comes to this digital art is the same as, say, with Banksy, or if you go back a little bit further with Andy Warhol. And Banksy, if anyone's not familiar, is like, you know, the graffiti artist, street artist who essentially makes templates, or sorry, stencils, and you know, provocative stencil art. So I mean, what's the difference between owning a Banksy's the richest living artist, as far as I know. Certainly his work sells for in the multi-million-dollar sphere. So, you know, what's stopped me just, I mean, what's the difference between having a real Banksy on my wall versus something I bought then, you know, that's the exact same image? And there is no difference. I mean, there is no intrinsic value in it. The value comes from you knowing that the artist made it and understanding some of the philosophy behind it, understanding the journey that the artist gone on to get there, understanding, you know, a little bit perhaps about the art history, and say, you know, even going back. And Banksy ruffled feathers, and then you have like the Damien Hirst as well. Damien Hirst is a great example of somebody who's transcending, you know, sort of more traditional art. Damien Hirst is still a very modern contemporary artist. You know, a lot of anyone who knows Damien Hirst's like work, you know, suspending sheep in formaldehyde, cutting a shark in half and suspending that in formaldehyde, you know, and sort of ask the question, is this art? But Damien Hirst came out with a couple of collections of NFTs recently. So it's kind of showing that, to me at least, demonstrated that there is some merit in this. And you know, if a new art form doesn't ruffle feathers, it doesn't have any merit at all. So that's on the kind of digital art side of things. Now, are the prices inflated? Who knows? I know that in the traditional art world, if you set a price, that is the price. I mean, you're not going to kind of have a sale. If you own a Van Gogh, you're not going to sell it for any less than you bought it for, right? And the same, I think, could be said for certainly not all of these PFPs, not all of these, but some of the more prestige artists like the Bored Ape Yacht Club, the CryptoPunks, etc. You know, it's probably there's a whole list of them. But they're probably going to keep their value. Now, there are obviously the market, it's been seen as being sort of an opportunity to make a quick buck. So the market is being probably inundated, and there's probably more supply than there is demand. And there's certainly a lot of speculation coming into the space. So how much of that sticks around, I don't know. But I think it is a valid art form, or valid art movement, we'll say. And it's unlikely that these pictures are going to go down in value. The interesting part about this is, I suppose, it brought attention to NFTs as a concept. And it's once you start then, as you mentioned off air, just about the sort of different applications of NFTs beyond just collectibles and you know, pictures that have scarcity value. Back a few years ago, we were, you know, I think you've probably heard this term, Trevor, back over the past few years, but, you know, everything will be tokenized was a nice kind of slogan, we'll say, that was popular in cryptocurrency and Bitcoin circles and blockchain circles, about, you know, at some point everything will have a digital footprint somewhere on the blockchain, or it will have a tradable or, you know, transferable digital version of itself. So, and that's kind of where I see the future as being, and it could be anything from, say, very topical would be like humanitarian aid, for example. So, you know, you give money to a charity and you want to sort of see what the transparency, so for greater transparency, so you give $100, €100 into a charitable organization that can be tokenized within the organization. You can see, you can trace exactly where your money is going. Or if you say, for example, a shipment of humanitarian aid leaves Dublin and it's arrives then in, you know, in Ukraine, we'll say, again, very topical, but arrives in Ukraine, how do you know it's getting to the right place? So there's a case of, you have a pallet with a QR code on it that has a unique digital footprint. and that can be, you know, tracked and traced all the way to from source all the way to endpoint and to the user. Yeah, it allows for, you know, so there's a million different ways. You take a, say for example, a car, your car, you buy a new car, and you'll have an NFT of your car. We'll have all the service history, all the telemetric data about how far you've driven. Has it been in a crash? Or what parts have been replaced? This sort of stuff. So instead of having relying upon you know, mechanics and previous owners to keep all the paperwork up to date, you know, when's the last time you had a full service history of the second-hand car you bought, right? Like, so, like that you can trust. So this sort of stuff. So just greater transparency. You talk about product life cycle. Again, the sort of the over the past few years, there's an increased will for manufacturers and consumers to be more cognizant of what happens to the products they're consuming after you've used it. So like the laptop I'm on right now, which is getting close to the end of its life, what happens with the hard drive? How are all the precious metals or the dangerous metals? How is all that all disposed of? So having an NFT that's associated with this, you're talking about the end of life cycle and making sure that components and everything is being recycled and reused, and not just being, you know, thrown into the sea sort of thing. So, you know, this sort of stuff there's a million different applications, and we're seeing more every day. I mentioned the company I have been working for myself for the last few years in the ICO space, and obviously as that went south, there's kind of you know, I've been very careful about the projects I've been working with, and began working with a marketplace called Niftify, and we're trying to make this easier for people who have these ideas to get in and just have a sort of like a Shopify for an NFT marketplace. So people can have these ideas, run it up the flagpole, see is there any sort of is there an appetite for it, and there's a million different potential applications, and we're just kind of scratching the surface right now. But yeah, it's interesting times.
Fascinating insights there, Reuben, as always. And I suppose for me, you know, new technologies is all about stickiness. You know, the Angry Birds phenomenon, going global, you know, and Pokemon, you know, phenomenon. I think NFTs have reached that level. In terms of acceptance then from providers, you know, I was at a webinar there last year by Sotheby's, you know, so they were providing an overview of what NFTs were, why they were getting into the market. So I think, you know, we're still at a pre-embryonic stage. And as you mentioned quite concisely there are other avenues that I can see, you know, NFTs being used, particularly for transparency and originality along the supply chain. And I've seen some very cool areas in terms of LearnFi, particularly from the education platform, where, you know, you get rewarded with NFTs for completing courses and watching videos.
Exactly. Well, look, even then, it's kind of, if you take the education part, which is close to your own heart and your own experience, but if you take an individual, so beginning, you know, in kindergarten or whatever, junior school, and coming all the way up, and you have a full history of what that person has been exposed to all the way up, all their grades all the way up, and you can have like permissioned access. So, you know, it's not going to be sort of available to anybody and everybody online, but then you can keep an eye on that. So any, you know, your full education history and your full accreditation all in one place, and you can allow people to access that. Potentially you kind of get into then sort of medical records and stuff. It is a bit trickier. There's a few nuts to crack left in that space, but, you know, take the education thing, I think is massive. You know, I know in the US, it's once you get your diploma, like you actually have to hang on to that piece of paper, and nobody actually believes you know, you've done it. So I mean, having a single source of truth, and with permissioned access, and, you know, so this could be something I'd see being taken on pretty quickly. There's very few barriers to that actually being something that is taken on. We're looking at a pilot project right now, in fact, with exactly that. So, so yeah, that could be something that will be absolutely the norm. You know, in a couple of years' time, we'll wonder what we did before. You know, before this was there. You had pieces of paper, yeah.
100%. As my daughter says, you know, we had this old Microsoft computer, so, you know, Microsoft Paint, draw a picture, NFT it, get your first million. But thanks again. Thanks a million for today, Reuben, and we'll keep our finger on the pulse just to see where, you know, NFTs are going. It's been great having you on again, and hopefully we'll be back as well for another iteration of a podcast as well.
We won't wait 6 years next time, Trevor.
No, most definitely not. Thanks a million, Reuben, for those insights today.
All the best, Trev. I'll talk to you soon.